I remember once watching ants carry food together, perfectly coordinated, tireless, obedient. No leader, no discussion, no philosophy. And yet, it worked. Then I looked at humans. We cooperate, we fight, we fall in love, we betray, we sacrifice, we build civilizations and destroy them. And suddenly a disturbing thought appeared. What if we are not as different as we think? Richard Dawkins begins The Selfish Gene with an idea that feels almost offensive. He says, you are not the main character. Your body, your personality, your dreams are temporary. You are a vehicle, a carrier, a machine built to pass something forward. Genes, not you. Take a breath with that. Because this idea doesn't say you're evil. It doesn't say you're meaningless. It says something stranger. It says life is older than morality, older than intention, older than consciousness. Think about it. You didn't choose your hunger. You didn't choose your attraction. You didn't choose your fear of death. They arrived fully installed, before language, before culture, before you even knew what you were. Dawkins asks, what if behavior isn't designed to make you happy, but to make genes survive? What if love is not holy, but useful? What if jealousy is not toxic, but strategic? What if morality is not divine, but evolved? That doesn't make life cold. It makes it honest. This book doesn't say humans are selfish. It says genes behave as if they are. That's important. Genes don't think. They don't plan. They don't feel guilt. They simply persist. The ones that survive write the rules of behavior. And suddenly, things make sense. Why parents sacrifice for children. Why tribes protect their own. Why cooperation exists, but only conditionally. Why betrayal hurts more than loss. Why morality feels instinctive, not chosen. Because if our instincts were shaped by survival, then morality is not absolute. Then good and evil are not eternal. Then guilt is not sacred. It's functional. That thought alone has scared entire civilizations. But Dawkins doesn't end with despair. This is not a nihilistic book. It's a book about freedom, the kind that comes after truth. Because humans are strange. We can understand our programming. And once we understand it, we can resist it. We can choose not to obey every instinct. We can choose compassion without genetic benefit. We can choose meaning without cosmic instruction. We are the first species that can say, I know why I feel this, and I will decide anyway. So this video is not about biology. It's about you, your desires, your guilt, your love, your violence, your kindness, where they came from, and what you do with that knowledge. Because once you see the strings, you can't unsee them. Sit back, take a breath. You're listening to Wise Alchemy. Let's begin. Before we go any further, we need to do something uncomfortable. We need to change the camera angle. Most of the time, when we talk about life, we start with people, human dreams, human suffering, human meaning. But Richard Dawkins does something almost rude. He steps back, far back, before nations, before culture, before morality, before even consciousness. He asks us to look at life from a place where humans don't matter yet. Dawkins doesn't ask, why do humans behave the way they do? He asks, what survives when everything else disappears? Bodies die, species fade, civilizations collapse, but something keeps moving forward. Genes. Not because they are alive in the way we are, but because they replicate. That's the shift. Life, in this view, is not about happiness, not about justice, not even about survival in the way we imagine it. It's about continuation. Genes that last shape the world. Everything else is a side effect. Unsettling, right? It feels disturbing because it pushes us off the center of the story. We like to believe we are the purpose, that our emotions are sacred, that our values are chosen freely, that our lives exist for some higher reason. But this lens whispers something colder. You are not the goal. You are the vehicle. That doesn't mean you're meaningless. It means meaning doesn't come built in. And that thought shakes people. Because if meaning isn't given, then responsibility is heavier. Now, this is where most people misunderstand the book. When Dawkins says selfish, he is not talking about greed. He's not saying genes are cruel or that humans should be selfish. Genes don't have intentions. Selfish is a metaphor. It means this. Genes that behave as if they care only about their own survival are the ones that remain. That's it. No evil plan, no moral judgment, just persistence. Kindness can exist inside this system. So can sacrifice. So can love. But they exist because at some point, they helped genes survive. That doesn't make love fake. It makes it ancient. Once you accept this perspective, questions start rearranging themselves. Why does guilt feel automatic? Why does betrayal hurt so deeply? Why do we feel loyalty to blood more than strangers? Why does cooperation collapse under pressure? It's not because humans are broken. It's because we were built for a world that no longer exists. And understanding that is not dehumanizing. It's clarifying. This is not meant to convince you. It's meant to unsettle you just enough to keep listening. Because once you stop looking at life as a story about people and start seeing it as a story about replication, everything you thought was simple becomes complicated, and everything you thought was fixed becomes negotiable. That's where the real conversation begins. Now that the lens has shifted, we have to follow it where it leads, even if it makes us uncomfortable. If genes are the ones that persist, then we're we. Not authors of the story. Characters. Temporary ones. Dawkins uses a phrase that feels almost insulting at first. Machines. Not heroes, not chosen beings, not the center of existence. Machines. Built slowly, imperfectly, to carry genes forward through time. You were not designed to last forever. Your body was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be good enough. Good enough to grow, good enough to reproduce, good enough to protect, good enough to pass the code on. And then replaced. That's not pessimism. That's honesty. Look at your body closely. It decays, it breaks, it forgets, it gets sick. If life cared about you, this design makes no sense. But if life cares about genes, everything suddenly clicks. Bodies are tools, eyes to see, hands to build, minds to predict, emotions to motivate. Fear keeps you alive. Pleasure pulls you toward reproduction. Pain teaches avoidance. Love binds you to protect offspring. None of these exist for truth or beauty. They exist because historically they worked. But also strangely elegant. Imagine life not as a single journey, but as a relay race that began billions of years ago. The baton is genetic information. Each body runs its short distance, a few decades, maybe less, and then passes the baton forward. Most runners never see the whole race. Most don't even know they're running. They just feel the urge to move, to build, to desire, to protect, to continue. Death in this view is not failure. It's expected. The race doesn't stop when you fall. It never did. why this feels dehumanizing and why it isn't. At first, this idea feels like it shrinks us. But look closer. If genes were the only story, we would be slaves to instinct. But humans are different. We can see the machine. We can recognize the urges without obeying them blindly. Understanding that your body is a vehicle doesn't erase meaning. It frees meaning from biology. Meaning becomes something you choose, not something installed. You are not important to the universe, but you are important to yourself. And once you stop pretending that life revolves around you, you gain something rare: clarity. Now that we've accepted something difficult, that bodies are temporary, we arrive at an even stranger idea. If bodies are replaceable, what isn't? Genes. They don't live like we do. They don't breathe, dream, or fear death. And yet, they outlast almost everything. An individual life is fragile. One illness, one accident, one bad season. Gone. But genes, they don't care about any single body. They move. From body to body, from generation to generation, from century to century. You are not your genes' first home, and you won't be the last. That's the shift Dawkins asks us to make. Stop thinking in lifetimes, start thinking in epochs. Suddenly, what looks like tragedy to us is just a transition to them. That doesn't make death meaningless, it makes it irrelevant to the process. Now, let's be careful. When Dawkins says genes want to survive, he's using metaphor, not intention. Genes don't plan, they don't desire, they don't think. But genes that behave as if they want to survive are the ones still here. That's it. The ones that failed, vanished. No judgment, no morality, just filtering. This is why the language feels unsettling. We're used to purpose, meaning intention. But here, purpose emerges without consciousness. Patterns that worked stayed. Patterns that didn't disappeared. To a gene, death is not an enemy. It's a handoff. If the information was passed on, the mission is complete. That's why evolution tolerates suffering. That's why bodies age. That's why perfection was never required. Longevity only matters if it helps replication. Nothing more, nothing less. That realization alone explains so much about life's cruelty. This chapter isn't meant to make you feel small. It's meant to make you honest. If genes are effectively immortal and bodies are not, then meaning cannot come from survival alone. It has to come from something else. From awareness, from choice, from resistance. You are the first kind of machine that can look at the blueprint and question it. That matters. Once you understand that genes don't care about you, you stop expecting the universe to be fair. You stop confusing biology with destiny. And something subtle happens. You stop taking instinct as truth. Desire becomes understandable, not sacred. Fear becomes explainable, not absolute. Guilt becomes questionable, not holy. This is not the end of meaning. It's the beginning of conscious meaning. The real winners of evolution are not the strongest bodies. They are the persistent patterns. And you, right now, are standing at a rare intersection. A temporary body carrying ancient code with the ability to say, I see you. This is usually the moment when people resist the book. They say, okay, maybe survival matters. Maybe genes persist, but kindness, love, sacrifice? Surely those can't be selfish. Surely when a parent runs into fire for a child, or when someone gives up comfort for another, or when a stranger helps with no reward, surely that means something pure exists. And Dawkins doesn't deny this. He just asks a quieter, more dangerous question. Where did this purity come from? At first glance, kindness looks like a mistake. Helping someone costs energy. Protecting another risks harm. Sharing resources reduces your own chance of survival. In a ruthless world, this shouldn't work. And yet, kindness is everywhere. Animals groom each other. Birds warn others of danger. Humans care for the sick, the weak, the old. If life is driven by survival, why would anything evolve that seems to do the opposite? This question haunted biology for decades. And Dawkins doesn't solve it with poetry. He solves it with honesty. Kindness did not evolve despite selfish genes. It evolved because of them. Not kindness for its own sake, but kindness that worked. Let's slow this down. When a gene creates behavior that helps copies of itself survive, even if that behavior looks generous, that gene spreads. Not because it's good, but because it's effective. This doesn't mean animals or humans are pretending. It means the mechanism underneath kindness is older than morality. Think about family first. Why does a parent sacrifice for a child? Emotionally, we say because of love. Biologically, something else is happening. That child carries copies of the parent's genes. Helping the child survive helps the genes continue. This is called kin selection, but you don't need the term. You felt it. You protect your own instinctively. You forgive blood more easily than strangers. Not because you were taught to, because it's built in. That doesn't make parental love fake. It makes it deeply rooted. Now here's where it gets more interesting. We don't only help family. We help friends, neighbors, sometimes even strangers. Why? Because evolution discovered something clever. If I help you today, you may help me tomorrow. This is called reciprocal altruism. But again, forget the term. Think of the feeling. Trust, reputation, memory. A species that remembers who helped and who betrayed outperforms one that doesn't. So, kindness spreads, but conditionally. This is why betrayal hurts so much. Not emotionally first, existentially. Betrayal threatens cooperation itself. That's why societies punish it harshly. Dawkins does not say morality is fake. He says morality is emergent. It feels absolute because it had to. A moral instinct that felt optional wouldn't work. Guilt had to hurt. Shame had to sting. Fairness had to feel sacred. Otherwise, cooperation collapses. So morality feels real, not because it came from the universe, but because it worked inside it. This is why moral emotions feel stronger than logic. They are older than reasoning. At this point, many people panic. They think, if kindness evolved for survival, does that mean love is just a trick? No. It means love is ancient. It means your compassion is not random. It is written into you by millions of years of trial and error. And here's the most important part. Understanding the origin of kindness does not cancel its value. You don't stop enjoying music because you understand sound waves. You don't stop loving because you understand hormones. Meaning doesn't disappear when explained. It becomes chosen instead of inherited. Here is where humans step beyond genes. You can help people who will never repay you. You can choose compassion that costs you genetically. You can decide to be kind even when it makes no evolutionary sense. That is not instinct. That is awareness. Genes created the capacity. You decide how to use it. If you misunderstand this chapter, you become cynical. If you understand it properly, you become free. Free from pretending humans are angels. Free from pretending morality fell from the sky. Free from guilt that has no purpose. Kindness is not holy because it is pure. It is meaningful because it is chosen. and choice only exists once you see the machinery underneath. My friend, you are not kind because genes made you kind. You are kind because you know you don't have to be. That difference matters. There is one loyalty almost no philosophy ever questions. Family. Before ideology, before religion, before nation, before morality, blood. We say it without thinking. Family comes first. Blood is thicker than water. I would do anything for my own. And most people never stop to ask, why? Why does a threat to a stranger feel distant, but a threat to your sibling feel personal? Why does loss hit harder when it comes from inside the family? Why does betrayal from blood hurt more than betrayal from anyone else? Dawkins doesn't answer this with poetry. He answers it with ancestry. From the genes' point of view, family is not an emotional concept. It is a mathematical one. Your parents carry copies of the genes you carry. Your siblings carry many of the same instructions. Your children carry half of you forward. So when you protect them, something deeper than affection is happening. Genes are protecting themselves. Not consciously, not intentionally, but reliably. Over time, genes that encouraged protection of close relatives outperformed genes that didn't. The result? An instinct that feels like love. Kin selection, without the jargon. You don't need equations to understand this. Think of it like this. If helping one person helps many copies of your genetic code survive, that behavior spreads. So evolution discovered a shortcut. Make family feel sacred. Make loyalty feel unquestionable. Make sacrifice feel noble. Not because it's morally right, but because it worked. This is why family bonds feel stronger than logic. They were never designed to be rational. Notice how instinctive it is. You might hesitate to risk your life for a stranger, but for a child, a sibling, a parent, the calculation disappears. That's not morality. That's biology overriding reason. And this explains something uncomfortable. Why nepotism exists everywhere. Why inheritance matters more than fairness. Why dynasties form. Why power stays in families. These aren't moral failures first. They are genetic biases. Let's slow down here, because this is where people get defensive. Explaining the origin of love does not reduce its experience. A mother doesn't love her child because she understands genes. She loves because the feeling is real. The biology explains why the feeling exists, not why it matters to her. Understanding gravity doesn't make falling hurt less. Understanding genes doesn't make love weaker. It makes it understandable. If loyalty to family is powerful, then loyalty against outsiders is inevitable. Tribal love has a shadow. If us matters more, then them matters less. And history is full of what follows. Tribes, clans, castes, races, nations, all built on the same instinct, just scaled up. Protect those who look like you. Distrust those who don't. Justify harm in the name of loyalty. This is how love turns dangerous, not because love is evil, but because it is partial. As societies grew larger, tribal instincts became a problem. You can't build a civilization if everyone only cares about blood. So cultures invented something new. Moral rules that override kin loyalty. Justice systems, universal laws, religious commands. Treat everyone equally. Do not show favoritism. Love thy neighbor. These ideas didn't come naturally. They had to be taught, and they had to fight instinct. Here's something Dawkins doesn't need to spell out, but you felt it. When a stranger betrays you, it hurts. When family betrays you, it destabilizes your identity. Because family loyalty is assumed. It is the foundation layer. When that breaks, the mind doesn't know where to stand. That pain is not weakness. It's the collapse of something ancient. Humans are not trapped by kin loyalty. We can recognize it. We can choose fairness over favoritism. We can protect strangers. We can adopt children. We can sacrifice for ideals. These actions don't serve genes. They serve values. Values only exist when instinct is seen clearly enough to be resisted. If you ignore biology, you moralize everything and understand nothing. If you accept biology blindly, you excuse everything and grow cruel. Wisdom sits in between. Understanding why we protect our own does not mean we must obey it. It means we can transcend it consciously. My friend, family loyalty is powerful, but it is not sacred. It is inherited, and anything inherited can be examined. After talking about family and blood loyalty, there's an obvious question left hanging in the air. If evolution only cared about relatives, why do humans cooperate with strangers at all? Why do people help coworkers they aren't related to? Why do neighbors look out for each other? Why do entire societies function without collapsing into chaos? If genes are selfish, why isn't the world pure betrayal? This is where Dawkins introduces one of the most unsettling ideas in the book. You don't need goodness for cooperation. You only need memory. At first glance, selfish organisms should cheat constantly. Take the reward, avoid the cost, lie when possible, exploit whenever you can. And sometimes they do. But here's what nature discovered over time. Cheaters don't win for long. In environments where individuals meet again and again, cooperation beats selfishness. Not because it's moral, but because it's strategic. That sentence alone changes how you see people. Let's remove the warm words. Forget kindness. Forget generosity. Think instead in simple terms. I help you now, you help me later. That's it. No halo, no virtue, just delayed benefit. This is what biologists call reciprocal altruism. But you don't need the name. You live inside it every day. You hold doors, you return favors, you remember who helped you and who didn't. Not consciously calculating, but instinctively tracking. Here's the key insight. Cooperation only works when memory exists. If organisms meet once and never again, cheating wins. But when interactions repeat, reputation matters. This is why memory is such a powerful evolutionary tool. If I remember you helped me, I help you again. If I remember you betrayed me, I withdraw or retaliate. This creates something extraordinary, a system where fairness emerges without morality. No rules, no ethics, no laws, just consequences. Trust is often portrayed as weakness, but in evolutionary terms, trust is calculated openness. You don't trust blindly, you test. You give small chances first, you escalate slowly, you watch patterns. This is why broken trust hurts so deeply. It's not just emotional pain, it's strategic failure. Your system misjudged. Revenge is not a moral flaw, it's a stabilizer. In systems of cooperation, punishment keeps cheating from spreading. If betrayal has no cost, everyone eventually cheats. So nature installed something dark but effective, the urge to retaliate, not because it feels good, but because it works. This reframes anger. Anger isn't always irrational. Sometimes it's ancient enforcement. Long before humans invented math, nature was running experiments. Cooperate, benefit. Cheat, short-term gain, long-term loss. Forgive sometimes, punish consistently. What survives is balance. Modern game theory later rediscovered this pattern. The most successful strategy? Not blind kindness, not endless revenge, but something subtle. Be cooperative, be cautious, retaliate when necessary, forgive when it restores cooperation. No morality required, just feedback loops. Here's the trick evolution played. When cooperation patterns stabilized, they started feeling like values. Fairness felt right, cheating felt wrong, betrayal felt dirty. Not because the universe judged it, but because cooperation demanded emotional reinforcement. Morality became the interface for deeper biological processes, like a user-friendly screen hiding complex code underneath. Civilizations scale this instinct up. Laws replace memory, police replace revenge, courts replace retaliation. But the foundation is the same. Predictable consequences create cooperation. Remove consequences and trust collapses. That's why corruption destroys societies faster than poverty, not because it's immoral, but because it breaks cooperation loops. Once you see this, you can no longer pretend morality floats above biology. But you also can't claim humans are heartless machines. You see something more honest. We are creatures capable of cooperation without pretending it's holy. And here's the quiet power. When you understand how cooperation actually works, you can choose it consciously. Not because you're good, but because you understand the system. My friend, cooperation doesn't need goodness, but conscious cooperation needs awareness. You can choose to forgive, not because genes demand it, but because the future matters. You can choose not to retaliate, even when instinct screams otherwise. That's not biology. That's reflection. This is where the book becomes deeply uncomfortable. Because up until now, we've talked about family, cooperation, trust. But now Dawkins walks straight into the one place humans guard most fiercely: love, romance, desire, attraction. The stories we tell ourselves about why we want who we want. And he asks a question most people never want answered. What if love is not the goal, but the tool? Why attraction exists at all? Let's start simply. Sex feels good. Desire feels urgent. Attraction feels magnetic. If reproduction were boring, life would end quickly. So evolution made reproduction addictive. Not intellectually rewarding, emotionally overwhelming. Genes that created stronger desire were passed on more successfully. Not because the organism understood reproduction, but because it wanted. That wanting is not random. It's engineered. Desire is not neutral. We like to think desire is personal. That's just my type. That's my preference. But preferences are patterned. Across cultures, across history, across species. Health signals, youth signals, strength signals, stability signals. Traits that increased reproductive success became attractive. Not consciously chosen, felt. You didn't choose what pulls you. It arrived already installed. Dawkins does not say men are bad. He does not say women are manipulative. He says something colder and more precise. Different reproductive costs create different strategies. For most of evolutionary history, females invested more: pregnancy, childbirth, care. Males could reproduce with less biological cost. That imbalance shaped behavior, not character, strategy. Why males tend towards spread? From a genes perspective, one successful male can produce many offspring. So genes that encouraged competition, risk-taking, display, and short-term mating spread easily. This doesn't mean every man behaves this way. It means the pressure existed. Culture can redirect it. Morality can restrain it. Awareness can transform it. But the pressure remains. Why females tend towards selectivity? For females, reproduction was costly. Choosing the wrong partner meant real danger. So genes favored selectiveness, assessment, preference for stability, sensitivity to commitment. Again, not destiny, pressure. This is why rejection hurts men more than confusion hurts women. Different strategies collide emotionally. Now, here's the genius part. If sex were purely strategic, it would feel empty. So evolution wrapped it in poetry. Butterflies, longing, idealization, attachment. Romantic love is not a lie, it's a narrative interface. It keeps organisms bonded long enough to raise vulnerable offspring. Love doesn't exist instead of biology, it exists because of it. Love feels bigger than survival. That's intentional. If love felt mechanical, you would question it. So love feels sacred, urgent, irrational, world-altering. This doesn't make love fake, it makes it effective. When attachment breaks, the system panics. Withdrawal, obsessive thinking, loss of meaning. Because attachment was designed to be stable. Separation feels like danger, even when it isn't. That pain is not weakness, it's the alarm system firing. Jealousy is not romantic, but it's ancient. It evolved as a guardrail, not to protect love, but to protect certainty. Uncertainty threatens genetic investment, so jealousy feels violent, intrusive, irrational, because it wasn't designed to be polite. Here's the fear people have. If I understand love biologically, will it stop feeling magical? No. It stops feeling possessive. You can love without ownership, desire without illusion, connection without denial. Understanding love doesn't kill romance, it kills delusion. My friend, genes gave you desire, but they didn't give you wisdom. You can feel attraction without being ruled by it. You can love without turning it into a prison. You can choose commitment not because biology pushes you, but because you understand the cost. That's not instinct, that's consciousness. If you ignore biology, you moralize desire and shame yourself. If you accept biology blindly, you excuse harm and avoid responsibility. Wisdom lives between. Love is not pure, desire is not evil, romance is not destiny. They are forces, and forces become dangerous only when unseen. If love were simple, it wouldn't hurt this much. If desire were aligned, relationships wouldn't feel like negotiations. And if men and women wanted the same things at the same time, there would be far less confusion, jealousy, and heartbreak. But Dawkins points out something quietly unsettling. Conflict between the sexes is not a cultural accident. It is built into the logic of reproduction. Not because either side is evil, but because their interests don't always align. At first, reproduction looks cooperative. Two people meet, they desire each other, they bond. But underneath that moment of unity lies a tension that never fully disappears. Who invests more? Who risks more? Who commits longer? Who can leave easier? When costs differ, strategies diverge. And when strategies diverge, conflict emerges. Not moral conflict, biological conflict. For much of evolutionary history, one sex carried pregnancy, one sex could reproduce repeatedly with less cost. That imbalance didn't create hatred, it created different incentives, and incentives shape behavior. One side may benefit from spreading risk, the other may benefit from securing certainty. Neither is wrong. They are responding to pressure. This is why relationships often feel like who cares more, who texts first, who commits deeper, who has more leverage. Even when people love each other, they often feel subtly misaligned. Not because they're broken, because they're pulling in different directions biologically. Love tries to align those directions, but tension remains. Jealousy, the ancient guard. Jealousy is one of the most explosive emotions humans experience. It feels ugly, intrusive, embarrassing. But jealousy didn't evolve to be pleasant. It evolved to protect certainty. Uncertainty threatens investment. So jealousy activates fear, anger, vigilance. Not because you're insecure, but because your brain is running old calculations. Jealousy is not proof of love. It's proof of risk awareness. When interests don't align, control emerges. Not always visibly. Sometimes it looks like emotional withdrawal, silent pressure, guilt, testing loyalty. Control doesn't begin as cruelty. It begins as anxiety. Anxiety about losing investment. Anxiety about imbalance. Anxiety about being replaced. And anxiety seeks certainty. Why competition never fully disappears. Even inside committed relationships, competition can linger. Competition for attention, for validation, for sexual interest, for emotional dominance. This doesn't mean love failed. It means evolution didn't design relationships to be static. They are dynamic negotiations, not permanent truces. Why romance intensifies conflict. Here's the paradox. Romance makes conflict worse, not better. Because romance raises stakes. When love feels transcendent, loss feels catastrophic. So small threats feel huge. Ambiguity feels unbearable. Distance feels dangerous. Intensity magnifies everything. Love doesn't eliminate conflict. It sharpens it. Modern society changed conditions, but not instincts. Contraception changed reproduction. Culture changed roles. Technology changed options. But ancient strategies still operate inside modern minds. We live in a world our biology wasn't designed for. That mismatch creates confusion. People expect harmony from systems built on tension. At this point, some people feel discouraged. They think, so love is doomed? No. It means love requires conscious navigation. Once you see the forces at play, you stop personalizing everything. Not every conflict is betrayal. Not every tension is failure. Not every disagreement is lack of love. Sometimes it's two strategies colliding. Here's where humans step beyond genes again. You can recognize jealousy without letting it rule you. You can feel competition without turning it into domination. You can choose communication over control. That doesn't erase conflict. It civilizes it. Understanding sexual conflict doesn't make relationships colder. It makes them honest. You stop demanding perfection from systems shaped by tension. You stop shaming yourself for feelings you didn't invent. And you gain something rare: compassion for yourself and for the other side. My friend, relationships are intense because they sit at the intersection of love and strategy. That doesn't make them meaningless, it makes them alive. If there is one kind of love humans insist is pure, it is parental love. We say it without hesitation. A parent's love is unconditional. A mother would die for her child. A father's sacrifice has no limit. And in lived experience, this feels true. Parents stay awake through exhaustion. They give up dreams. They endure fear, stress, and loss without expecting gratitude. So the question feels almost offensive. Why would evolution care about parental love at all? Human children are helpless for a long time, much longer than almost any other species. Without intense care, they do not survive. So genes that produced weak attachment disappeared. Genes that produced overwhelming attachment remained. Not gentle affection, not polite responsibility, but a love so strong it overrides reason. A love that feels sacred. Because if parental love felt optional, humanity would not exist. Parents don't calculate. They don't weigh costs consciously. They act instinctively, jumping into danger, giving up food, working beyond exhaustion. From the genes perspective, this makes perfect sense. The parent is temporary. The child carries the code forward. Sacrifice is not heroism. It is continuation. That doesn't make sacrifice meaningless. It explains why it feels inevitable. Raising a child is expensive. Energy, time, resources, emotional stability. Evolution doesn't ignore cost. It balances it. Parents invest until return becomes likely. That sounds cold, but nature is not sentimental. If resources are scarce, investment strategies change. This explains something people don't like to talk about: why parental care varies, why stress weakens attachment, why poverty increases abandonment, why extreme conditions reshape love. This is the darkest part of the book, but it matters. If parental love were unconditional in every context, genes would sometimes waste themselves. So evolution allowed a tragic possibility. When investment costs exceed survival odds, attachment can break. Not because parents are monsters, but because survival logic reasserts itself. Abandonment is not the opposite of love. It is love overwhelmed by circumstance. It doesn't justify it. It explains its existence. Parenting is saturated with guilt. I'm not doing enough. I failed. I should sacrifice more. Because parental instinct evolved to be intense, it rarely feels satisfied. Enough is never enough. This keeps investment high, and guilt becomes the emotional fuel. Not moral failure, biological pressure. Another uncomfortable observation: humans tend to invest less easily in children who are not genetically related, even when they want to, even when they try. This doesn't make them cruel. It reveals how deep genetic bias runs. Culture tries to override it, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Awareness helps. Shame doesn't. Parental love feels limitless because it evolved to feel that way, but it still operates within limits. Stress, trauma, scarcity, fear. These can fracture even the strongest bonds. This doesn't mean love was fake. It means love was pressured beyond capacity. Humans can parent beyond biology. Adoption, fostering, sacrifice for unrelated children. These acts do not benefit genes. They benefit values. That's not instinct. That's ethics. Ethics only exist once instinct is understood and overridden. If you don't understand biology, you turn parenting into moral theater. You shame parents. You judge failures. You ignore conditions. If you understand biology too much, you risk excusing harm. Wisdom is seeing both. Love evolved, but love can also be chosen. And chosen love is heavier and more meaningful than instinctual love. My friend, parental love is not holy because it is perfect. It is holy because it is burdensome, because it demands more than most instincts. And when someone chooses to carry that burden, even when biology wavers, that choice matters. In 2022 alone, more than 450,000 people died from violent conflict worldwide. That's not history. That's not ancient tribes. That's not barbaric times. That's now. And here's the uncomfortable part, my friend. These numbers didn't come from monsters. They came from ordinary humans. People with families, people with beliefs, people who, on most days, wanted peace. So the real question isn't, why are some people violent? It's, why does violence keep returning, even when everyone claims to hate it? Violence is not a human failure. It's a biological inheritance. From the genes perspective, violence is not moral or immoral. It is conditional. When resources are stable, cooperation wins. When resources collapse, aggression activates. Every human alive today descends from ancestors who survived conflict. Those who froze, submitted, or refused to defend were erased from the genetic record. So aggression didn't evolve because it was cruel. It evolved because it worked. Territory, status, and survival. Across cultures, across centuries, across species, the same three triggers repeat. Territory, status, access to resources. Strip away flags, religions, ideologies, and wars shrink into these basics. Modern nations fight over oil, land, water, influence. Ancient tribes fought over hunting grounds, shelter, mates. Different language, same algorithm. Contrary to popular belief, genes do not prefer violence. They prefer intimidation, posture, display, threat, hierarchy. Actual fighting risks injury, and injury risks death. That's why most animals fight rarely, but threaten constantly. Humans are no different. Most violence erupts only when status or survival feels truly threatened. Fear is the engine, not hatred. Hatred is loud. Fear is quiet. Most violence begins not with rage, but with existential fear. Fear of losing control, fear of humiliation, fear of being replaced, fear of becoming irrelevant. Anger is often fear armored. When societies feel cornered, they don't become kinder, they become dangerous. And here's where humans differ from animals. Animals fight individually. Humans fight collectively. Language allows coordination. Symbols allow loyalty. Stories allow justification. Now aggression isn't personal, it's ideological. We are right. They are evil. This must be done. Genes didn't invent ideology, but ideology is a perfect delivery system for ancient instincts. Civilization is not a moral project. It is a containment system. Laws, borders, courts, police, rituals, sports. These don't erase aggression. They channel it. Societies that failed to manage violence collapsed, not because people were evil, but because unchecked aggression destroys cooperation. Humans carry two opposing instincts, the instinct to fight and the instinct to cooperate. Both are real. Both are inherited. That's why violence feels disgusting and why it keeps returning. This tension is not hypocrisy. It is evolution struggling with itself. Calling violence pure evil doesn't stop it. Justifying violence as natural excuses it. Understanding violence does something else. It gives distance, and distance creates choice. Genes push, they don't command. Modern weapons magnify ancient instincts. Our biology evolved for spears and fists, not drones and nuclear warheads. That mismatch is the real danger, which means restraint is not weakness, it is intelligence. Violence is not humanity's shame, it is humanity's burden. The gene doesn't care how survival looks, but we can. And that ability to understand our darkest instincts without obeying them, that might be the most fragile achievement civilization has ever made. Aggression didn't disappear. We just learned to negotiate with it. Why does guilt feel so real? Not taught guilt, not religious guilt, not social guilt. I mean that instant, almost physical feeling, that tightness in the chest, that heaviness when you know you've crossed an invisible line. No police, no God watching, no one knows. And yet something inside you reacts. If morality were just a cultural invention, why does it feel wired into the body? That's where Dawkins takes us, to a place where morality exists without needing morality itself. Genes do not think in terms of right and wrong. They operate on a simpler rule. Behaviors that increase survival and reproduction tend to persist. That's it. But here's the strange outcome. When you put selfish genes inside social animals, something unexpected happens. Patterns form. Helping behaviors, fairness instincts, punishment of cheaters, emotional discomfort after betrayal. Not because genes care about ethics, but because groups with these traits survived better. Morality is not the goal, it's the byproduct. Imagine early humans living in small groups. No police, no written laws, no prisons. If you stole, cheated, or betrayed too often, you weren't fined, you were excluded. And exclusion meant death. So genes that created internal alarms, shame, guilt, anxiety had an advantage. These feelings stopped harmful behavior before punishment arrived. Guilt is not virtue, it is preemptive survival software. Fairness is not idealism, it's strategy. Studies show something fascinating. Even young children and even some animals react negatively to unfairness. Capuchin monkeys have been observed rejecting food when another monkey receives a better reward for the same task. That's not morality, that's evolutionary bookkeeping. Fairness stabilizes cooperation. If cooperation collapses, everyone loses, so fairness feels sacred because historically it was. For morality to work, it cannot feel optional. If guilt felt negotiable, it wouldn't stop behavior under temptation. So morality feels obvious, universal, self-evident, non-negotiable. But that doesn't mean it is. It means evolution made it feel that way. The same way hunger feels urgent, the same way fear feels unquestionable. Feeling absolute does not mean being universal. Physical pain protects the body. Shame protects social position. When you feel embarrassment, you are experiencing the threat of social exclusion, even if no one is actually rejecting you. Modern society amplifies this. Social media doesn't invent shame, it weaponizes it. Because the brain still thinks social rejection equals danger. If morality were objective, it wouldn't vary so wildly across time and place. Yet some cultures praise aggression, others condemn it. Some value individual freedom, others value obedience. Genes provide emotional tools, not fixed moral rules. Culture fills in the details. That's why morality feels eternal, but changes constantly. If morality is just biology, they say, does that make goodness fake? No, it makes goodness human. Meaning does not disappear when we understand its origins. Love doesn't vanish when we explain oxytocin. Music doesn't vanish when we explain sound waves. Morality doesn't vanish because it emerged. When you see morality as an evolved instinct, you become less self-righteous, less eager to punish, more curious about behavior, more cautious with judgment. You stop asking who is evil and start asking what conditions produced this behavior. That shift alone changes everything. Morality did not descend from the sky. It rose from survival. It feels sacred because it once kept us alive. But understanding its roots doesn't destroy ethics. It gives us choice. And choice is the one thing genes cannot force. Maybe the most ethical act is not blind obedience to morality, but conscious responsibility for it. Up until now, we've talked about selfish genes, violence, love, guilt, morality, survival. And somewhere in your mind, a question has probably been growing. So, am I just a machine? When people hear genes influence behavior, they don't hear influence, they hear control. They imagine their choices shrinking, their identity dissolving, their freedom replaced by chemistry. But that fear comes from a misunderstanding. Genes don't write scripts, they set tendencies. Think of genes like gravity. Gravity influences how you move, but it doesn't decide where you walk. You can jump, you can climb, you can resist at a cost. Genes work the same way. They nudge, bias, increase probabilities. They do not issue orders. If genes controlled behavior absolutely, there would be no addicts in recovery, no monks resisting desire, no artists starving for meaning, no soldiers refusing orders. Yet those people exist everywhere. Here's the key idea Dawkins quietly leaves us with. Once a system can understand its own programming, it is no longer fully controlled by it. Genes shaped instincts. Instincts shaped emotions, but consciousness introduces reflection. You can notice urges without obeying them. That gap between impulse and action, that is where freedom lives. Ignorance feels like freedom, but it isn't. If you don't understand hunger, it controls you. If you don't understand fear, it controls you. If you don't understand desire, it controls you. Understanding doesn't erase instincts, it loosens their grip. That's not determinism, that's leverage. Let's be honest, freedom is not easy. Acting against biology requires energy, discipline, awareness, long-term thinking. Genes push for the short term. Freedom plays the long game. That's why freedom feels exhausting and instinct feels easy. Not because instinct is right, because it's old. People think, if biology influences me, then I'm not responsible. But responsibility doesn't require total freedom. It requires capacity. And humans have something rare: the capacity to reflect, delay, redirect. Not perfectly, not always, but enough to matter. Some people say this view is bleak. I disagree. It's honest, and honesty creates compassion. When you see how much behavior is influenced, you judge less. When you see that choice still exists, you excuse less. Understanding biology doesn't erase ethics, it grounds it. You are not a puppet. You are not a blank slate. You are not free in the way fantasy imagines. You are something far more interesting. A biological system that learned to question itself. Genes built the machine, but consciousness learned to sit at the controls. Not always well, not always wisely, but sometimes. And sometimes is enough to change the future. Genes don't care about meaning, but you do. Genes don't care about justice, but you do. Genes don't care about truth, but you can. And that difference, that tension, that is not a flaw. That is the human condition. Maybe freedom isn't the absence of biology. Maybe freedom is learning to live with it, without being ruled by it. If genes were truly in control, this chapter wouldn't exist. Books wouldn't exist. Monks wouldn't exist. Birth control wouldn't exist. Artists who starve from meaning wouldn't exist. And yet, here we are, which means something unusual happened. For most of evolutionary history, learning was slow. Instinct ruled. But at some point, humans crossed a threshold. We learned how to learn from each other. Not genetically, culturally. Ideas started traveling faster than genes. And once that happened, biology lost its monopoly. Genes update across thousands of years. Culture updates overnight. One generation learns something, the next inherits it without mutation. Fire, language, tools, laws, music, stories. None of these are written in DNA, yet they shape behavior more powerfully than instinct ever could. That's not evolution replacing biology. That's evolution building something that outgrew it. Think about this carefully. Genes push for reproduction, yet humans choose birth control, celibacy, monastic life, child-free existence, sacrifice for strangers. From a gene's perspective, these are failures. From a cultural perspective, they are meaningful choices. This tells us something important. Instinct is powerful, but not final. Why humans can rebel against genes? Here's the key difference. Animals respond. Humans reflect. Reflection creates delay. Delay creates choice. You can feel hunger and not eat, desire and not act, fear and still move forward. Culture trains this capacity. Rituals, education, ethics, self-discipline. These are tools designed to resist instinct when instinct is harmful. Why would someone risk their life for a stranger? Why would someone die for an idea? Why would someone choose meaning over survival? Genes don't understand these acts, but cultures do. Because culture values continuity of meaning, not just continuity of bodies. Let's be clear. Culture doesn't erase biology. It negotiates with it. We still feel hunger. We still feel desire. We still feel fear. But culture decides which instincts are honored and which are restrained. That's not denial of nature. That's mastery of it. There's a warning here, too. Cultures that ignore biology entirely become brittle. They demand perfection. They deny instinct. They punish weakness. That always collapses. Healthy cultures don't pretend biology vanished. They acknowledge it and build systems to guide it. No species before us created a second layer of evolution. Genes made bodies. Bodies made brains. Brains made culture. And culture started shaping behavior faster than genes ever could. That's not rebellion. That's emergence. You are not a prisoner of your instincts. You are not free from them either. You are something far more rare. A biological being with the capacity to choose against biology when the moment demands it. That choice isn't automatic. It must be learned, practiced, protected. Culture is not decoration. It is the technology that allows freedom to exist at all. Maybe the most radical thing humans ever did was not invent fire or language, but refuse to obey every instinct that built them. Up until now, we've been talking about genes, tiny instructions fighting to survive through bodies. But Dawkins makes a sudden, dangerous move here. He says, what if genes are not the only things that replicate? What if ideas behave the same way? Genes replicate through sex, but ideas replicate through attention. The moment humans learned language, evolution escaped the body. Stories began to spread. Beliefs began to compete. Songs, rituals, myths, rules. Not because they were true, not because they were good, but because they were memorable. That's the birth of the meme. What a meme really is. Forget internet jokes for a moment. A meme is an idea, a behavior, a belief, a habit that copies itself from one mind to another. Just like genes, memes mutate, memes compete, memes survive or die. But memes don't care about you. They care about spreading. Why culture evolves faster than nature? Genes need generations. Memes need moments. A single speech can change a nation. A single slogan can move millions. A single lie can outlive the truth. That speed makes memes powerful and dangerous Because evolution without breaks doesn't ask permission. Religion as a successful meme. Why do some religions last thousands of years? Not because they're true or false, but because they contain replication tools, promises, threats, rituals, identity, community, fear of doubt. Memes that discourage questioning protect themselves. That's not divine strategy. That's evolutionary efficiency. Political ideologies spread using moral certainty, enemies, simplified stories, emotional hooks. The stronger the emotion, the faster the spread. Anger travels faster than nuance. Fear travels faster than facts. Truth doesn't win by default. It must compete. People don't adopt ideas because they are logical. They adopt them because they reduce anxiety, provide belonging, offer identity, explain suffering, blame someone. Memes that satisfy emotional needs outcompete boring truths. That's why conspiracy theories spread faster than corrections. Your brain is not a temple of reason. It's a habitat. Ideas fight inside it. Some make you calmer. Some make you angry. Some make you loyal. Some make you afraid. And just like genes, the ideas that survive are the ones that keep themselves alive. Why memes don't care about your happiness? A meme doesn't care if it makes you miserable. If it spreads, it wins. That's why some beliefs destroy the people who hold them, yet refuse to die. Suffering does not kill memes. Silence does. We like to imagine culture as wisdom accumulating, but much of it is competition. Ideas fighting for dominance. Narratives fighting for loyalty. Symbols fighting for meaning. You are not just thinking, you are hosting. The responsibility Dawkins quietly hands you. Once you understand memes, you can't unsee them. You start asking, who benefits if I believe this? Does this idea spread truth or itself? Does this belief make me stronger or just obedient? Awareness is the only immunity. Genes built your body. Memes shape your mind, and both want to survive through you. But unlike genes, memes can be refused. You can choose which ideas deserve a home. In a world ruled by replicators, conscious selection might be the rarest freedom of all. Religion is one of the oldest things humans ever carried forward. Older than science, older than nations, older than written law. And yet, it survives even in a world of satellites, biology, and algorithms. So the question isn't, is religion true or false? The deeper question is, why does it endure? Religion didn't evolve by accident. From a genetic and mimetic perspective, religion is not a random belief. It is a highly successful system. Not because it explains the universe perfectly, but because it solves several ancient human problems at once. Fear, uncertainty, death, loneliness, chaos. Religion didn't need to be correct, it needed to be useful. Every long-lasting religion contains mechanisms that protect and spread itself. Rituals, repeatable behavior. Stories, memorable narratives. Authority, trusted interpreters. Obedience, stability. Sacred texts, preservation. These are not accidents, they are replication strategies. A belief that demands practice stays alive longer than one that doesn't. From a mimetic lens, obedience is not about morality, it's about fidelity of transmission. The less room there is for interpretation, the fewer mutations a belief undergoes. That's why doubt is often framed as danger, not because doubt is evil, but because doubt threatens continuity. Humans evolved under constant threat. Death was close, disease was common, nature was indifferent. Religion offered something rare: meaning in suffering, order in chaos, hope beyond death. From a gene's perspective, a calmer human survives better. From a meme's perspective, a comforting belief spreads faster. Belief alone doesn't keep religion alive. Belonging does. Shared rituals create identity. Shared morality creates trust. Shared symbols create unity. People don't just believe religion, they live inside it. And leaving it often means losing family, community, and meaning at once. That cost keeps memes alive. Some religions were used to control, others simply stabilized societies. Both outcomes emerge naturally when belief systems organize behavior. Rules reduce chaos. Predictability increases cooperation. Control doesn't always require manipulation. Sometimes it emerges from structure itself. Why religion survives even when challenged. Science explains how. Religion explains why. Science tells you what happens when you die. Religion tells you what it means. These domains don't compete cleanly. That's why removing religion doesn't erase the need it fills. It just leaves a vacuum. And vacuums always attract new beliefs. Modern replacements for religion. When traditional faith weakens, new belief systems appear. Nationalism, ideology, moral absolutism, celebrity worship, online movements. Different symbols, same mechanics. Humans don't stop believing. They change objects of belief. Seeing religion through a genetic lens does not strip it of dignity. It explains its power. It explains why belief can bring peace and why it can bring conflict. It explains why people cling to faith even when logic fails. Because belief doesn't answer logic, it answers fear. Religion is not just an idea. It is a living system shaped by centuries of human need. Understanding its mechanics doesn't require rejection. It requires awareness. Maybe the most dangerous thing is not belief itself, but believing without knowing why you believe. After everything we've uncovered, selfish genes, hidden motives, survival strategies, there's a quiet fear that settles in. A question most people are afraid to ask out loud. If love has biological roots, does that make it fake? People hear biology explains love and think it replaces love. But explanation does not equal erasure. Knowing how music works doesn't stop it from moving you. Knowing how fire burns doesn't stop it from keeping you warm. Biology explains how love arises, not what you choose to do with it. Why love exists at all. Yes, attraction has patterns. Yes, bonding chemicals exist. Yes, attachment increases survival. But here's the part people miss. Evolution explains why the door exists. It doesn't tell you which room to enter. Genes can spark connection. They cannot write devotion. Animals bond instinctively. Humans can choose. You can stay when leaving would be easier, forgive when revenge feels justified, care when benefit is unclear, commit when desire fades. These acts do not help genes, they help meaning. That's where love stops being biological and starts being existential. Genes push towards advantage, love often chooses disadvantage. Staying with someone during illness, sacrificing comfort for another's well-being, choosing loyalty when opportunity tempts. From a gene's perspective, these choices don't make sense. From a human perspective, they make life worth living. That's not instinct. That's defiance. People fear that if love has an origin, it loses its magic. But nothing meaningful is originless. Language evolved. Art evolved. Music evolved. Yet none of these feel mechanical when they move you. Meaning is not destroyed because it came from somewhere. Meaning exists because something conscious chose to carry it forward. Instinctive love burns fast. Conscious love lasts. It knows desire will change. It knows fear will appear. It knows conflict is inevitable. And it stays anyway. Not blindly, not compulsively, but deliberately. That choice transforms chemistry into commitment. Genes built the foundation, culture expanded it, consciousness elevated it. Love didn't disappear under biology, it evolved beyond it. That's the pattern of this entire book. Without this chapter, the selfish gene feels cold. With it, the book reveals something profound. Understanding what shaped you does not trap you. It frees you to decide what you will become. Love doesn't need mystery to matter. It needs presence. It needs choice. It needs someone willing to say, I know where this came from, and I choose it anyway. Maybe love isn't weakened by biology. Maybe love becomes most powerful after we understand it and still choose to believe. Once people hear, genes influence behavior, a temptation appears. A convenient thought. Then, it's not really my fault. That idea has caused more harm than ignorance ever did. So let's be precise here. Understanding why something happens is not the same as saying it is acceptable. Biology can explain aggression, it cannot justify cruelty. Biology can explain impulse, it cannot excuse action. If explanation erased responsibility, then no society could exist. Courts would collapse, trust would collapse, meaning would collapse, and humanity would regress to instinct alone. Genes shape tendencies. They influence temperament, impulse strength, risk-taking, fear sensitivity. But genes do not plan crimes, write manifestos, choose victims, or justify harm. Those steps require cognition. And cognition brings responsibility. Cruelty requires narrative. Animals kill without cruelty. Cruelty is uniquely human. Because cruelty requires justification, dehumanization, and story. No gene tells you this person deserves suffering. That belief is constructed, which means it can be resisted. Responsibility does not require perfect freedom. It requires capacity. The capacity to pause, reflect, predict consequences, and choose differently. Humans possess this capacity unevenly, imperfectly, but real. That's enough. Why crime cannot be reduced to biology? Yes, biology increases risk. Trauma matters, environment matters, neurochemistry matters. But turning explanation into excuse creates a moral vacuum, and vacuums get filled with brutality. A society that removes responsibility does not become compassionate, it becomes dangerous. The difference between understanding and surrender. Understanding biology should make us design better systems, reduce unnecessary harm, intervene earlier, judge more wisely. It should not make us surrender moral agency. If anything, awareness increases responsibility. Because now you know. Instinct says, act when triggered. Ethics says, stop. That pause, that interruption, is civilization. It is fragile, it is exhausting, it must be taught and defended. But without it, everything we value collapses. Biology explains pressure. Ethics governs response. Genes push, culture guides, individuals choose. Remove any one of these, and the system fails. Evil is not a gene. It is the point where awareness exists, alternatives exist, and harm is chosen anyway. That distinction matters, not because we want to punish endlessly, but because we want to protect meaning. Understanding biology should not make you softer on cruelty. It should make you sharper, more precise, more careful, more responsible. Freedom is not the absence of influence. Freedom is the courage to answer for what you do despite influence. And that responsibility, heavy as it is, may be the clearest proof that we are more than machines. This is where many people expect despair, because once you accept that genes don't care, that evolution has no plan, that the universe does not whisper purpose into existence, a silence appears. And silence scares us. The fear behind no purpose. When people hear there is no cosmic intention, they don't hear neutrality. They hear abandonment. They imagine life becoming empty, cold, mechanical. But that reaction comes from a misunderstanding. No given purpose does not mean no possible meaning. It means something else entirely. Stars don't care if we exist. Genes don't care if we're happy. Time doesn't slow down for grief. That's not cruelty. That's indifference. And strangely enough, indifference is honest. The universe is not pretending to care. Only humans do that. Meaning has never been found under a microscope. It doesn't exist in atoms, equations, or genes. Meaning appears after awareness. It is constructed through attention, commitment, choice, responsibility. A painting has no meaning without a viewer. A word has no meaning without a mind. Life is the same. Nihilism says nothing matters. This chapter says something different. Nothing matters by default. And that difference is everything. If meaning were handed to you, you'd be a servant to it. Because meaning is not given, you are free to build it. There is no hidden destiny waiting to be unlocked, no universal script written for you, no final authority telling you what your life must be. That truth feels heavy, but it is also respectful. It treats you like an adult. A meaning you inherit can be abandoned. A meaning you choose must be defended. Chosen meaning costs something: time, energy, sacrifice. That cost is what gives it weight. Suffering does not disappear just because it lacks cosmic justification. Pain still hurts, loss still wounds. But suffering gains dignity when it is not dismissed as part of a plan. It becomes something to respond to, not something to explain away. Genes explain how we got here. They do not tell us what we should become. That decision remains open, uncomfortable, unresolved, human. Meaning is not something you believe in. It's something you do. The person you stay for. The value you refuse to betray. The truth you speak when silence would be easier. The responsibility you accept without guarantee. These acts don't impress the universe, but they shape a life. When the illusion of cosmic purpose breaks, something unexpected remains: space. Room to decide. Room to create. Room to live honestly without pretending the universe agrees with you. Maybe meaning was never meant to be discovered. Maybe it was always meant to be carried. Life has no built-in instruction manual, and that is not a flaw. It is an invitation. You were not born to fulfill a purpose. You were born with the capacity to choose one. And that choice, fragile, temporary, incomplete, might be the most human thing this gene-driven universe ever produced. My friend, this chapter exists for one reason. Because the selfish gene is one of the most misquoted, misused, and morally hijacked books in modern science. And that misuse has consequences. The biggest myth: survival of the cruelest. Some people read this book and walk away thinking, if genes are selfish, then cruelty is natural. If evolution rewards survival, then dominance is justified. If biology explains behavior, then morality is meaningless. That is not science. That is projection. Dawkins never argued that what exists equals what should exist. Describing a process is not endorsing its outcomes. Social Darwinism takes a biological explanation and turns it into a moral permission slip. It says, the strong deserve more, the weak deserve less. Inequality is natural, therefore acceptable. But this leap is not scientific, it's ideological. Evolution explains how traits spread, not how societies should be organized. The book explains statistical pressures, not commands. Genes influence impulses, biases, and emotional reactions. They do not dictate laws, ethics, justice systems, or human dignity. Confusing influence with obligation is the core mistake. Dawkins repeatedly warned readers, biology explains behavior, but it does not justify it. Understanding selfish mechanisms does not mean surrendering to them. In fact, the entire point of awareness is to rise above blind processes. The most dangerous misunderstanding is this: if nature is cruel, we should be cruel too. Nature also contains cancer, parasitism, and infanticide. No sane person argues these are moral ideals. Nature describes what happens without reflection. Humans are reflective. That changes everything. Science asks, what is happening? Ideology asks, what should we do with this information? Confusing the two leads to eugenics, biological determinism, moral nihilism, and dehumanization disguised as realism. Dawkins wrote science. He did not write a political doctrine. On the internet, ideas are simplified into weapons. The selfish gene becomes a justification for greed, an excuse for apathy, a badge of intellectual superiority. But none of that comes from the text. It comes from insecurity wearing science as armor. What the book does not say. Let's be precise. This book does not say humans should act selfishly. Compassion is fake. Morality is pointless. Society should imitate nature. Ethics are illusions. It says something subtler and harder. What it actually says. It says life evolved without intention. Genes compete for survival. Behavior has biological roots. Awareness gives us choice. Culture can override biology. And that last point matters most. If behavior were purely evil, we could demonize. If behavior were purely free, we could blame. But biology reveals complexity, and complexity demands care, not cruelty. Understanding does not remove accountability, it deepens it. The danger is not the selfish gene. The danger is reading it shallowly, taking a microscope and trying to use it as a moral compass. Science tells us how the engine works. It does not tell us where to drive. Knowledge without humility becomes ideology. Explanation without ethics becomes brutality. And intelligence without responsibility becomes dangerous. Dawkins did not write this book to excuse selfishness. He wrote it to explain life. What we do with that explanation is still our choice. Once you truly understand this book, something subtle happens. You stop arguing with biology, and you stop worshiping it. Many people stop at understanding. They learn why jealousy exists. They learn why aggression appears. They learn why love feels overwhelming. And then they get stuck there, explaining themselves endlessly. But explanation is not wisdom. It's only a beginning. Wisdom asks a different question. Now that I understand this, how will I live? Not how will I justify myself? Not how will I excuse my impulses? But how will I respond to them? Genes map tendencies. They do not decide direction. Knowing your instincts does not mean obeying them. It means recognizing when they are speaking. Hunger does not command you to steal. Anger does not command you to destroy. Desire does not command you to betray. Awareness creates space. To live consciously is to pause where instinct rushes, to question where impulse pushes, to choose when reaction would be easier. That pause is not natural. It is learned, and that makes it powerful. Values chosen without awareness are inherited reflexes. Values chosen with awareness are commitments. When you choose kindness, knowing selfishness exists, it becomes meaningful. When you choose honesty, knowing deception is easier, it becomes strength. Freedom is not being untouched by biology. Freedom is not purity. Freedom is relationship. A relationship with your drives where you listen without surrendering. Some fear this book removes meaning. It doesn't. It removes illusions. And in doing so, it hands responsibility back to you. You are no longer pretending you are good because nature made you so. You are choosing to be. Genes ask, how do I survive? Humans ask, what is worth surviving for? That question has no biological answer, and that is precisely why it matters. You were shaped by forces older than memory, but you are not owned by them. Understanding the selfish gene does not reduce you to biology. It reveals the moment where biology ends and responsibility begins. Maybe the most radical act in a selfish gene world is not rebellion, it's conscious living. You are not just a survival machine. You are a chooser standing inside a system that does not care and choosing anyway. That choice is where humanity begins. And that's it for today, my friend. You were listening to Wise Alchemy. The story ends here for now, but you and I, we'll meet again. Thank you.